Thank you, Tom. And I also want to thank everyone who's attending today. I'm broadcasting today from our Detroit Applied Tech Systems office, which is in the Eastern time zone. But I know we have folks attending from various parts of the globe. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening accordingly. So today we'll be spending about 30 minutes together. And in that time, we'll go through several different topics. The theme, of course, is paper killing your inspection process? So with that in mind, we'll go through the various quality gates you typically find in a foundry or a casting process. We'll look at the general advantages that going to software versus using paper and pencil would offer you as an organization. If you are going to consider software for collecting and analyzing your data, there are certain primary considerations. We'll run through those. We'll go through options for your digital data collection interface. That'll be done through an actual live demonstration of the data collection portion of a software application. And then after we've collected some data, we'll also look at some web-based analysis that's available. That way, before we're done, you'll get a view of what it would look like to your inspectors as far as collecting data goes, and also what your management might see from a reporting standpoint. This, like any other investment, would have to be justified. So we have a sheet that we're going to run through that helps you calculate your current cost of quality and a payback. You'll be able to download that and other material at the end following a Q&A period. So again, you'll get a copy of the presentation as well as a brochure and that cost of quality and savings calc sheet. So if I look at a typical casting process, and this graphic you're seeing here is specific to the investment casting process, but it would be similar if you're doing sand casting or die casting or permanent mold. There'd just be a couple of differences here. But continuing with the investment casting theme, there are many quality gates throughout the entire casting process. If I'm making wax models, I'm of course doing inspections of those individually as well as when they're connected to a tree. Once that model is dipped, most foundries do an inspection of the investment or shell. And of course, if you're doing sand casting, you may not be investing or taking a look at wax models and shells, but you are surely doing inspections of cores, molds, dies, etc. So once you've actually poured your part, there's typically a knockout or shakeout type process and a cutoff if your parts are made on a tree as they are in investment casting. That's usually the first actual inspection of the product, and you'll see that the quality gates here are listed or indicated by a magnifying glass with a check in it. So after visual inspection, if no defects are found, it typically goes to a different type of inspection process, perhaps X-ray or FPI, or if there are defects found at either visual inspection or the other processes, the part is typically routed to a finishing area where some kind of weld or rework is done, or even things such as grinding off a high gate, etc. If your parts are not worth repairing, then perhaps they're just remelted, but they may go to a scrap dispositioning area where actual scrap reasons are indicated. Lastly, you're of course shipping parts. If there's some failure in your quality gate system and non-conforming material gets to your customer, it is often the case that if there's a customer return, that material is logged in and inspected at that point, and what you're finding from a return from a customer is correlated with what you're finding in your process. So needless to say, there's many different inspection points. There may be other ones such as dock audits, layered audits, things along those lines. But most foundries these days are still using paper and pencil methods to record this data, and then maybe Excel or an ERP or MES system to try and analyze that. So you'll see here some very common formats for inspection forms. If you are doing data collection against a graphic because you want to map the location of your defects, you'll see here on the upper right-hand corner a typical example of that where I have a picture of various views of the parts and I mark the location and type of defect. In foundries, a tick sheet, as we might call it, which you'll see on the upper left-hand corner, is also a very common tool to be used from a paper standpoint, where you'll see hash marks put in boxes listing various defects. Those totals are totaled up and then entered into Excel later. If you also have a series of specific items, such as measurements or verifications that take place. You'll also see a checklist as a common format for data collection and entry, and you'll see an example of that down below. But if you are using paper and pencil, there are several drawbacks to that. Often the emphasis is put on getting the paperwork versus actually using the data to drive continuous improvement in your processes. One of the biggest problems, of course, is a piece of paper isn't that flexible. They often lack the information or interface needed to collect all the data you'd like to have as a process or quality engineer. The other problem with paper and pencil that usually arises is that those paper sheets have to go to somebody who keys them into Excel or an ERP or MES system. And at that point, you have a lag time from when you produced non-conforming material in the first place, and then your work in process usually has a certain quantity of non-conforming material you have to then sort or, of course, prevent from reaching your customer. And then lastly, if you're keying this data into Excel or you're trying to use SAP or another ERP or MES system, it is often the case that these software programs don't give the analysis you'd like to have in order to quickly and completely arrive at the root cause and reduce your defects. So having said that, let's say you have noticed these drawbacks in your existing system and you do want to consider some software for collecting and analyzing the data. Some of the primary considerations are listed here, and we'll go through them. One of the first ones is if I'm using software, I typically have to decide if I'm going to run on a tablet, which would be the case if I'm using inspectors that go from point to point, or I'm inspecting large castings. Or if I have a fixed station that's somewhere like an FPI booth or a scrap dispositioning center or X-ray, you may want to use software running on a fixed PC. The software can run on pretty much any hardware, so it is hardware agnostic. So if you like to use a Surface tablet or a Panasonic Toughbook, you can pick the hardware that your IT folks like and simply run the software on that. We looked at a couple of different types of paper forms that are used. Some are image-driven, where I'm putting marks on a sheet of paper for various defects. So in that case, you'd want to make sure that your software can display a graphic and then allow through a touch screen or by clicking with a mouse or touchpad the ability to pick the position and the type of defect. Or if I am taking measurements or I need a response for each item, we would call that a checklist interface, where your software would need to take an inspector or operator through a series of checks. If you're doing variable data entry, like taking measurements on a wall thickness or a hole ID, that is also best served by a checklist. Other things you might want to think about is if you are using software, do you need to display job aids, work standards, defect descriptions, or send quality alerts to the floor to your personnel? So that's a common desire in a software for data collection. Do you want to make comments through the process? So if I see porosity, for example, do I want to associate any comments with that? If you do, you'll of course need the ability to have free-form data entry associated with the defect. Along the same lines, if you're doing customer returns or having to visit a customer site, or if you're doing aerospace or defense parts, it's very common to want to take a digital photo and attach that to the inspection record. So if you need to do that, you'll need a software that can leverage the camera in a tablet or allow you to upload digital photos. And lastly, what I always try to remind my customers to think about is what kind of analysis do I need? Because if you want to, for example, analyze by shift or cavity or hour or operator, you need to make sure that you are setting up your interface for data collection to capture this information. Otherwise, you won't be able to analyze by that later. So those are some of the items you should be considering when you evaluate a software package. So let's move on and actually look at some software. First, we're going to look at what data collection looks like, and then we'll look at some of the analysis that's available from the data that's been collected. We're going to spend some time with an off-the-shelf configurable software package this morning called Inspect. It is, of course, from my company, Applied Tech Systems. So first, I'm going to pull up the data collection interface called Data Collect. So all of you now should be seeing a screen that says ATS up in the upper right-hand corner. I do want to mention that this is an off-the-shelf configurable package. So whether you're inspecting molds, cores, wax models, large parts, small parts, die casts, you would be able to configure this to best suit your inspection requirements. You'll see some tabs across the top of the screen here for navigation. You'll also see some fields here. In my example, I'm going to be doing a serialized part. So you can see I have a field for the serial number. I can print a repair ticket. There's a login button. So these things are all configurable and customizable. The way that you see the screen today is merely the way it's been configured for me to show various aspects of the software. So I've already logged in. Usually as an inspector or an operator, the first thing I would have to do is select the part that I'm inspecting. So here, by pressing the green button, I get a pick from list. You can categorize your parts into groups. So you can see here as I pick different groups, I get a different list of actual parts down below. The nice thing about using software for data collection is you can leverage other technologies such as a barcode scanner. So if you have an etching on your casting or a barcoded part number, you can scan the part number and bring up the part that way as well. So there's various different ways to pull up a part. In this example, I'm going to inspect a knuckle. So once I select the part, again, I could scan the serial number as well, which would appear up here in the box. And when I do that, I can call up the CAD image of this specific part. You'll notice it is a live CAD image, so I can rotate the part in free space. For orienting the part into a predetermined angle and orientation, I can also click on the thumbnails over here on the right. You'll see as I do so, the part reorients. So when I'm looking at the part, I have the ability to note the area where the defect is found simply by touching. If I have a touch screen, or in my case, I'm using a laptop, I would just click on the location. The software captures the location and then presents me with a customized list using your defects for that process. So for example, if I was looking at wax models instead of an actual part, I might see things like bubbles or melted area or things along those lines, or deformity. So here, if I saw porosity, I'd simply click on porosity, and then that could be it. But many of my foundries want to enter additional information for that nonconformance. As an example here, you may rank your defects as scrap or minor, repairable, non-repairable. So here I'm going to say this is a minor defect. The software also has the concept of assigning a responsible cell and area. A good example of this is you may, in your machining area, find porosity that you've uncovered during the machining process. Well, even though you found that defect in the machining area, it's actually a casting defect. So here you might have a responsible cell as the melt shop or the foundry, etc. I can pick that operation. If you do want to enter comments, you can see here I have a comment box displayed, and I can simply type in it. Whatever comments I put in for this defect on this part, it'll be associated with that unit record. I can also click on this picture of a photo. You'll notice down here on the right-hand side, you'll see a picture of a camera. I can simply click on that camera icon, and it will access the integrated camera on my laptop or on my computer. Sorry for the glare, but I'm just trying to show that I can simply take a photo. That photo is then associated with, again, this defect on this part. So if you need to take photos, you can certainly do so and then access them later for your customer reference or internal use. When I'm done, I simply go back to the main screen. I can go back to that image, and I can continue to collect information simply by picking the defect and location. As I enter defects on this part, you'll see that it can be very fast, and I have a flag on the image that is associated with the location. So that's for graphic defect entry, where if I don't see any defects, I don't make an entry. If I do, I note the location and the type of defect. By the way, you'll also notice I have the ability to access documents down here. These can be work instructions or job aids. So here, if I want to look at, say, what my standards are for certain types of defects or examples of what porosity looks like versus shrink versus cold flow, I can do that. It can be as simple as a document like that. I can call up digital photos. Here's an example of what porosity looks like. If you're a quality manager and you want to send quality alerts down to the floor, you also have the ability to do that. So here I have a quality alert where I'm supposed to be looking for specifically a through hole as an oil passage that we've had problems with. Now I've inspected this part. I can print a repair ticket that I can then put with the part and it can go to repair. But also I have the ability at the repair station, or if the operator who found the defect can repair it, I can click on this repair button, the crossed hammer and wrench. Then you'll notice that my cursor turns into a wrench. And when I pick that defect, I can then call up a list of repairs that are specific to that defect. So here, for example, I'm going to polish out the loose material. When I do that, I save it. You'll see the flag turns green. That means it's been noted as repaired in the inspection record. Here, if I go to die wash and I repair that, you'll see that I get a different set of defects, and I'm actually going to scrap this part. All right. Now, lastly, I can call up a product that does not use a CAD image. I can also use a digital photo. So here you'll see this large housing. The large housing has the ability to have me look at digital photos. These are nothing special. Any photo you take with a digital camera can be used. You'll see I have different views of the part. I click on that view. I pick the defect, and it essentially works the same as if I'm using a CAD image. All right. We talked about the fact that I can have checklist questions. So if I go back to the knuckle here and I do an inspection on that, I have the ability to call up a checklist, which is just like what it sounds like. Here I get the knuckle, but instead of going to the image, I'm going to call up the checklist. Here I have a series of items that I need to answer before I can move on from this part. So for example, you'll notice I can have a job aid for each question here on the left. Here I answer if the ID stamp is legible. The software knows what a quote unquote right answer is. So if I say yes, it gives me a green check mark. So that question has been noted in the unit record as a correct answer. And now it moves on to, is there scale present in the major hole? Now, the right answer to this would actually be no, because I don't want scale present in the major hole. If I say yes, you'll see I get a customized message at the top, contact the supervisor, and the software notes that that is the wrong answer and it is a non-conformance on the part. So as I move down here to a measurement section, you can see I'm taking various measurements. I can click on this job aid to the left and enlarge the print for my reference. Then I'm going to key in a value here. So if I'm taking measurements with a digital caliper, I can key that in. If you do have a digital caliper with an interface of some sort, you can take the reading directly from the gauge. So I'm just going to move through these measurements here and put in the entries. And similar to the yes, no, if I get a value that is incorrect, it knows that that's out of spec, and it logs that as an out of spec or non-conformance on the part. And then lastly, I'm verifying the material heat, and that completes my inspection record. So all this data goes into a database, and then I have the ability to access a web-based reporting package. And I'm going to do that here. Actually, I'm going to call up a different set of charts first. So here you'll notice in the reporting, I have a series of reports down on the left-hand side. The software has over 80 out-of-the-box reports. They're categorized into different types of reports, such as defect analysis, direct run analysis, graphical reports for defect mapping, management dashboards, repair summaries, etc. But each individual unit that I have inspected, even if it's gone through several different quality gates in my facility, all that information from the various inspections and repairs are tied together into a single unit history. So when I retrieve any report here on the left, you'll notice I get a panel on the right, which allows me to filter by various things such as time and date, or in this case, I'm looking at a specific serial number. It's a single unit history, and I want to see all the information associated with serial number 55102. So when I key in that serial number, I'm going to move these panels aside. This report will render, and this has again compiled all the information at all the various quality gates where information was entered. You'll see some header information. This was a knuckle. Here's the serial number. If I had information such as the cavity or the Julian date or the material heat number or order number, that would all be displayed here. As I move down, you can see that at each tracking point where inspections were made, it time and date stamps the inspection, tells me how long it took to do that inspection or repair, what the shift was, who the user was, whether there were defects or repairs made, etc. So here the report includes a graphic with where the defects were found and if those defects were repaired, which is indicated by a red or green marker. Here it lists each one of the individual defects, like a scratch here, what the repair was, which was finessing it. Here I had a crack. As I scroll down, you'll also see the answers to those checklist questions. So if you're an aerospace customer and aerospace foundry, by the way, and your customer calls and asks for information on a specific serial number, instead of trying to go through a lot of different sheets of paper, you have the ability here to retrieve everything by serial number very easily. So each part has a single unit history, but then all those single unit histories are in a database, and that allows me to do things such as get aggregate reports that combines the data from a series of records. One example of that, which is very popular, is a product ranking. You have different part numbers that run through your shop. You might want to know which products are producing the most defects. So this product ranking, as I selected on the left, then displays a sorting panel, and I can do things like pick a different time and date range. Maybe I just want today's data, or just yesterday's, or this month, or last month, or this year. So I'm just going to pick all the data from this year. You'll also notice I can do things that pertain to data that I entered during the inspection process. Like maybe I want just a certain responsible cell or area, such as machining defects or the casting area. I can pick one part, or I can pick a series of parts here from this list. I can also do things like select a certain rank, like I only want to see scrappable non-conformances. So once I've picked the time and date range and other criteria, I run the report. And what this product ranking does is it goes through my data and it takes all the aggregate data that meets my filtering criteria over here. And in this example, it's showing me that last year, my most problematic part was the knuckle. Now, as I look here, I also have a series of hyperlinks. So if I wanted to get more information on the knuckle, I can either click on this hyperlink or I can click on the knuckle itself. Then it shows me that I'm working only with data from the knuckle. And then it'll break down that knuckle into different areas I might have defined in the image, like the suspension arm, etc. And then I can literally keep drilling down until I see exactly what defects are most pertinent on a knuckle. So that's a very common report to try to see which parts are most problematic and what the problems are. You may want to go at it from a different direction. Here, for example, I want to get a Pareto chart of my top defects. So I'm picking this concern ranking. I'm filtering my information just as I did on the last report. But here, instead of getting a list of parts, it shows me what my top defects were. And again, I always get a table down below. So here, if I want to pick porosity, I can click on porosity, and that shows me if I have a problem across all my parts with porosity or whether a certain part is more prevalent. So that's just a couple of reports. I want to show you some things here too. Let's say you have a process and you want to analyze by shift and concern. Well, because the data is in a database, we can instantly create a report, and I'll shrink this report a little bit so you can see it. Here, for example, it combines all the data from my criteria. It's showing me a Pareto chart of my defects, which appear here along the x-axis, and then on the y-axis, it's showing me which shift those defects are being produced on. You can get a lot of other different reports here as well. I can trend my defects. So if I want to get a trend, are my defects increasing or decreasing? I can run a trend graph of my defects. I can also export this data to Excel. And once I've rendered a report, you can see here, I can export that information to Excel, PowerPoint, a PDF, and I can email it or do whatever I'd like to with it. Lastly, one of the most popular reports is mapping my defects. So if I go over here, I remember when I was inspecting that knuckle, I was adding defects to a live CAD image. Well, this report, which is called a concern spectrum, mimics the type of report many of my foundries do where they lay a grid over the part. So here you'll notice I've laid a 10 by 10 grid across, and as I rotate the part, this is a very valuable report to your tooling or process engineers. It's just as if they're rotating that part in their hand, but you'll see that in each of the cells as I reorient the part, it's telling them exactly how many defects are in that cell, and the cell is color-coded based on the total percentage of the overall defects that are present in that cell. You'll notice over here I have a list of the possible defects I can analyze for, and here I can either show all the defects, or I can just pick particular defects and map that, or a series of defects. We have a similar report called a concern scatter. So as opposed to placing quantities of defects in cells, what I'm doing here is I'm actually mapping each individual defect. Each defect has an icon. You'll see that listed on the right, and as I rotate the part, you'll see, for example, that porosity, which has this icon, seems to be centered over here by this hole, and I can see different defects associated with different icons on the part. And again, I can hide them and just map particular defects if I choose to. So that's what the software for both data collection and analysis looks like. I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint here. And if you do decide you'd like to consider an investment in software like this, the next question is, well, will it pay for itself? So this software is not like purchasing a robot where you're replacing a certain number of people and you can just do a calculation based on how much the robot costs versus the people it replaces. This is more like, I would use the analogy of financial software, where the payback comes from getting better information on a more timely basis. This is a page you see out of a manufacturer of aerospace engines that also does castings. And here what they did with the software is they launched it in their investment casting process with wax models. And you can see here, by getting more timely and more detailed information, they were able to reduce the number of defects in their wax patterns by over 40%. So that's where the kind of payback comes from. Now we have a form you're going to be able to download after this webinar. And it's a sheet that will allow you to calculate your cost of quality and your return on investment. So what this allows you to do, and I'll just call this up here, excuse me. What this allows you to do is it's a fill in the blank form, and you can go through the various areas that contribute to your cost of quality. For example, if you're using paper and pencil methods and you have a certain number of hours per month that someone is keying data in, let's just say 15 hours, you can put in your number of hours under administrative labor savings. You can also put in your own labor rate. So if my labor rate's $16 an hour, you'll see that it takes this number of hours times my labor rate, and it calculates a monthly cost. What also I have the ability to do is say, well, if I'm using software, I don't have to key in this information anymore in most cases. So I can say I'm going to reduce that cost by 85%, and you can see it calculates a monthly savings from that category. You can do the same thing here for several other categories that organize and contribute to your cost of quality. So for example, here's a number of months, number of hours I might have in a month generating Excel analyses. Again, I can put in an hourly rate, let's say $20 an hour, and here it calculates that cost. And then I can say I'll reduce that by 75%, and I have a resultant monthly savings. So you can go through various categories here. Here I'm calculating my reduction and savings from a scrap and rework standpoint. So if I have monthly production of, let's say, $1 million, and I have a 3% scrap rate, that results in a $30,000 cost of scrap. Well, if I feel I can reduce that amount by 10%, or let's say 15%, you can see here when I hit the button, it recalculates and gives me a scrap savings. So you can go through here for a bunch of different categories, such as sorting, hours per month on rework. If you have to go to a customer site, you can put in your approximate cost for airfare, time, travel, etc. Production losses, time spent in meetings. So all of these contribute to an overall cost of quality and then a monthly savings, and you can compare that to the investment you want to make in software, and you can show your management what the payback would be. So again, you'll be able to get that after the webinar is a download. So that pretty much finishes up from this point. I want to thank you all for attending. What we're going to do now is open up the floor to questions and answers. Your questions will be taken, and Tom, the moderator, will then state the question, and I will answer it. And I thank you again for joining today.
Hi, Nick. Yeah, we've got a couple of questions. So the first one is, will it interface with ERP applications such as SAP?
Yeah, good question, and one we commonly get. I would say in about 90% of our installations, we are actually sending information to an ERP or MES system or receiving it. The software does have a communications module, which makes it easy for you to access information from SAP as an example, or Rockwell software or any other application, or you can send some data from our Inspect software to an ERP or MES system so you can include that information in some of your overall reporting. So yes, it's very easy to integrate the software, and if you need to do that, we just derive a scope of work and then we quote that development for you. Thank you, Tom.
Okay, and one other question. Can actions be configured to take place when checklist questions are answered incorrectly?
Yes, and typically what people mean by that is, let's say I'm taking a dimensional check on a part, and I have readings that are out of spec. The software has what we call an event services module, which allows you to set up data-driven triggers, such as an out-of-spec situation, and then you can send automated texts or emails to designated personnel, alerting them to that situation. You can also do things such as light a stack light, or send a message to a PLC, or send information to an and-on board. So yes, that's also a very common activity and easily done with the software. Thank you, Tom.
Okay, and that's all the questions.
All right. Well, again, all I'd like to say is I want to thank everybody for joining. You'll see my contact information on the screen here. So if you would like to have a discussion of your particular situation and if the software might be a good fit for you at your foundry, please feel free to contact me. What you will be receiving probably tomorrow is a copy of the presentation, a brochure on the software, and a copy of that cost of quality worksheet, so you can use that at your own facility. So thank you again. I really appreciate your time today.